More than 6,400 people were murdered in South Africa in just 3 months. That's according to the first quarter crime statistics released by Police Minister Bheki in Pretoria today. This represents an increase of 664 murders compared to the same period last year. 2 police stations, one in KwaZulu-Natal and another in the Eastern Cape, combined recorded the highest number of killings.
The number of murders in this country remains high and worrisome. 6,424 people were killed by other persons in South Africa in the first quarter of 2022-2023 financial year. This is an increase of 664 more people murdered compared to the same period last year, when the country was placed under COVID-19 lockdown level 1 and 2. The 3 main causes of murders remain arguments and misunderstanding. Retaliation and revenge murders were second motive for murder, and vigilantism was the third most likely cause of murder in South Africa. The Umlazi, Pesislar police station in KwaZulu-Natal and Umtata station in Eastern Cape registered their highest murder cases during this period. 221 murder cases were reported in those 3 areas combined.
Well, let's get the reaction now to those crime statistics from Simon Howell, who's an expert on issues to do with crime in this country. Simon, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time as always. Your initial reading then, or reaction, shall we say, to the figures released today?
Good afternoon. Well, I think, the figures are shocking as ever. The reports are such that there have been marginal increases and decreases depending on crime category. But ultimately, I think the numbers themselves remain extremely high, especially around murder and rape and serious crimes. And, we need to begin thinking about how we can use these statistics to begin thinking through the performance of the police. If we think of the rapes, the number of rapes that occurred and, the number of convictions thereof, this seems to me quite a poor performance in terms of policing and the criminal justice system as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at murders, right, over 6,000 people murdered in a 3-month period. When you look at the top 3 reasons, arguments, revenge killings and vigilantism, what that then speaks to is how there's clearly an entrenched culture of addressing differences or trying to resolve problems through violence, does it not?
Indeed. So, South Africa has a history of violence and a culture of violence that remains embedded within our society. And I think, that's reflected, as you mentioned, in the murders. But it's also reflected in the way in which we deal with problems, it seems. And, when problems arise, it seems that we reach to violence as a means of solving them. And, of course, to change that will require significant levels of education, but also, a complete mindset shift in terms of how we deal with our problems. And I think ultimately, until we begin having that conversation about how we should deal with these things, the murder rates will never really come down.
But are we doing enough then, Simon, to get rid of guns in South African society? Because a gun is still the most likely weapon to commit a murder in this country to date.
I think we haven't done enough thus far. The police have made some effort to both secure guns that have been made illegal, but also to get guns off the streets. But these are not significant efforts, and we will continue to see high levels of gun violence in this country, both until we change the laws around guns, I think, but also until we change our mindsets about using guns. I think people reach for guns too quickly and too easily in this country, or they were too easily accessible. And as a result, we see that reflected in the very high levels of murder that are continually reported in the policing reports. Just
on your suggestion that we may need to change the laws, to what effect? What more do we need to do? There's a firearm amnesty. Our laws are considered stricter than in some other parts of the world. How could we strengthen them?
I think it's not only about quantity but quality. So we need to think through how to ensure that gun owners are rigorously trained and constantly, updated and constantly recertified, so as that we can be sure that people that do own guns legitimately know how to use them and know how to use them in the right instances and, will not use them in the wrong instances. And we also, on the other hand, need to focus on why there still remains a proliferation of illegal firearms in this country and where the sources of those firearms are coming from. There have been efforts by the police to curtail this, but it remains very high. And so, there must be some source that has not been dealt with. And until such time as they do, it's very difficult to bring down murder rates and the like.
And of the 9,516 rapes reported between April and June of this year, over 3,700 happened either at the home of the victim or the home of the attacker. That then is problematic because if people aren't safe in their homes, where are you to be safe?
I agree. The problem with gender-based violence is that, A, it's underreported. So, what is reported to the police may actually be significantly under reflection of what is actually occurring. But, it speaks to people's need for safety in their homes and the fact that we seem as a society unable to deal with each other in a manner that allows for people to be safe in their homes. And, rapes and murders, both of which are very high, continue to be the order of the day. And I don't think, until such time as we can deal with these things at a societal level, until we begin having a conversation, or a really honest conversation with ourselves about why these things continue to exist, I don't think the police will be able to themselves do anything to substantially bring down either of those rates.
And am I right to say that majority of, well, not majority, but 3,708 rapes happening either at the home of the attacker or the victim, also it would be fair to infer that these would be attacks that happened between people who knew each other or even intimate partner violence, which also then has that added layer, as you were saying, of underreporting, where in some cases people don't report because it's a boyfriend, it's an uncle, which then is why this is not necessarily the most accurate data.
Well, yeah, there is that concern, that people may not report, but there's also, I think, there's quite a common instances where people report a crime or report gender-based violence, but then retract the case because they feel that, they can forgive the person or forgive their partner and the like. And while that's all good and well, it obviously begs the question, why is this occurring in the first place? And, there's significant levels of crime and violence in this country, and that has in some sense infected the way in which we understand ourselves and understand each other. And I think we tend towards violence far too easily in this country, and the way in which we deal with each other and each other's issues and conflict is one that almost necessitates violence, it seems.
Makes you wonder, though, if laws and regulation is the best route to address behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the laws and policies and the like are only one aspect or one side of a coin here. And there's a far deeper need to engage with people and to engage with the way in which they understand violence and what violence is considered to be in this country. And, begin working towards something else. And I'm not sure how that could be done, but clearly something needs to be done because we are an extremely violent society. And until such time as we figure it out, I'm afraid, I don't think these type of figures will really drop at any substantial level.
We spoke about how shocking it is that 3,700 plus people are raped in this country. Majority of them, fair to assume, of course, were women who were victims of sexual violence. But when you read further down the police minister's statement, it says this: public transportation, such as buses, taxis and trains, are the third most likely places for rapes to happen. How do you even make sense of that if people are being raped in a taxi, on a bus, on a train?
Well, transport is obviously, public transport is the primary means by which people get to work, and as such, these are common places where people find themselves. And again, the concern is that, people are not looking out for one another and allowing these things to occur, but also that they feel that they can, and they have an entitled right to do this to each other. It's significantly worrying that in this instance, a lot of men, for instance, believe that this is a legitimate action to undertake. And, it's clearly not. And, I don't know how one can begin solving that. But there's clearly a significant concern here in that women are not safe in a variety of spaces, whether it be their home, whether it be the transport to work, or whether it be in the place of work itself. And that will require far more holistic engagement with the issues rather than just simply focusing on policing, I think.
And when you say women are not safe in South Africa, I want to give another number to our viewers and you perhaps. From April to June of this year, 855 women were killed in South Africa. 243 children were also murdered. And we're not taking care of the most vulnerable because the number of children has remained in the hundreds for quite a while now. Who is killing the children of South Africa?
Well, again, it's a concern that remains, and I think a lot of the child murders are by immediate family members. And again, that sort of begs the question, well, why is this occurring? I think that there are significant levels of concern, stress and allowance of violence in families that contributes to this. But equally, there is a need for far harsher laws, I think, in terms of dealing with vulnerable people and providing a system in terms of the criminal justice chain of system that allows for people and victims to adequately engage with it. I think, it's quite traumatic for a lot of people to report crimes of this nature and engage with the criminal justice system. And I think there needs to be a better way of doing things, ultimately in the future.
So the highest number of murders in this court under review were in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng. They recorded more than the Western Cape, but the Western Cape has been in the news because we're hearing of extortion rings, which have been in existence for quite a while, but they're apparently becoming quite more entrenched. We're seeing murders of people in large groups in areas such as Khayelitsha, where 4 people, I recall an incident where 4 or 5 people were shot, and no one could explain who'd killed them or why, right? When you hear the minister speak today, he's announced that a total of 498 people, in fact, died from gunshot wounds in the Western Cape. And there's been a toing and froing between national government, the province and the metro about what to do and where the problem lies. What's your analysis?
Well, I would say that, both in terms of mass killings and in kidnappings and the like, there is an element of organized crime there. And these increases have been a function of organized crime further entrenching itself and growing in the country. And, there is a correlation between that, although perhaps not causation, between the growth of organized crime and the weakening of crime intelligence and that capacity within the policing sphere to undertake and engage with these type of entities and networks. So, until such time as the police begin dealing with the considerable issues within crime intelligence and the investigative services, I fear that, organized crime may continue to proliferate, and as a result, these type of crimes will continue to increase.
Simon Howell, good to speak to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.